We've been talking a lot all day about the role of the United States in the world. We've heard it from the European perspective. We've heard it now from Greenland's perspective. We've heard it from Canada's perspective, Panama's perspective. Now we're going to explore it from the U.S. perspective. Let me welcome to the stage my panelists. I have with me today Walter Russell Mead. He is a distinguished author, a columnist with the Wall Street Journal, and a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. And also with me is Paul Leto. Paul is senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a former senior director of strategic planning on the National Security Council. Thank you both. Before we hear from these two distinguished gentlemen, we're going to hear a few words from Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, still a member of the U.S. Congress, a Democrat from California. Let's listen to her words.
Good afternoon. As Speaker Emerita of the United States House of Representatives, it is my privilege to bring greetings from the Congress and address this distinguished Copenhagen Democracy Summit. Each year, this important forum convenes many respected champions of freedom and human rights from all over the globe, combining our many voices into a powerful megaphone for democracy. Thank you, Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen, for your long-time leadership in the global arena, from advancing peace and prosperity in Denmark as Prime Minister, to strengthening our transatlantic alliance as NATO Secretary General, to now leading in the fight for freedom, freedom for all, as chair of the Alliance of Democracies Foundation. When the history books are written, the central story of our time will be the battle between democracy and autocracy. Around the world, we see dictators on the rise, renewed attacks on free speech and religious liberty, brutal assaults on sovereignty and territorial integrity. As we speak, the heroes of Ukraine are on the front lines waging a ferocious fight, not only for their freedom, but for freedom in the world. Their extraordinary stand against Russia's crucial crusade continues to inspire us all. Freedom-loving people everywhere must continue standing together to resist Russian aggression, and it's imperative that our global community works to hold Putin and his government accountable. In 2022, it was my honor to visit Taiwan, where our congressional delegation met with President Tsai and with so many leaders determined to preserve their freedom. Our visit made clear President Xi cannot isolate the island, and America stands in solidarity with this free and flourishing democracy. But since our visit, China has only accelerated its abuses, brutal crackdowns in Hong Kong, genocide against the Uyghurs, erasing language, faith, culture of Tibet, further aggression against Taiwan, and more. If we fail to speak out on human rights in China for commercial reasons, we lose all moral authority to speak out on human rights anywhere in the world. Today, I salute each of you for your leadership, ensuring that freedom is at the top of the global agenda. And working together, we will defend democracy against dictatorship, and for now and for generations to come. That remains our sacred charge, to stand against dictatorship, to stand for freedom and democracy, and to stand for those yearning to be free. Thank you for the honor of participating, and best wishes for a successful summit.
So Congresswoman Pelosi says the U.S. must stand up for Ukraine, human rights, freedom, and democracy. At this point in time, is that a pipe dream? Walter, you want to take that first?
I don't think so. I think my guess is that a significant majority of Americans would agree with the sentiments that the speaker expressed there. And I would say even taking some of the things by this administration that seem to be moving in another direction, their argument is not, I think, that the United States should withdraw from the world or stand against freedom. They're making an argument that for the United States to be able to do these things, it has to reorder its domestic priorities. It needs to, that the current economic system, in their view, undermines the long-term ability of the U.S. to carry out these responsibilities. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but I don't think they're really trying to sort of ditch the whole concept of some connection with the United States of America and liberty.
Paul, your thoughts?
I agree with that. And I think regardless of the turmoil that will accompany the next 3 years, and they will accompany the next 3 years, as we all know.
3.5.
3.5.
3 3/4.
It will.
But who's counting?
And this is to get back to Walter's point, which I think is fundamentally important as we talk about U.S.-European relations. It will remain a vital national interest of the United States that far surpasses and endures anything happening in the immediate term to be in closest partnership with Europe and our European friends and allies across the board, economically, militarily, defense, et cetera, both within Europe and then outside in the Indo-Pacific, as we've talked about earlier today. So regardless of what happens in the very short term, I hope both we as Americans and you all as Europeans remember that our fundamental national interests, which will endure, remain in the closest partnership.
Well, let's talk about the short term, if we could. Donald Trump talks in glowing terms about Vladimir Putin, about President Xi, about Viktor Orban. J.D. Vance goes and meets with the AfD in Germany. Does this administration believe in democracy?
Well, look, it is meeting with the leaders of a party that competes legally in democratic elections anti-democratic. I'm not sure I would make that argument. I don't think that some of the things that the vice president said in Europe were particularly diplomatic, nor do I agree with all of it. But I don't actually think that meeting with a European political party that has a significant support in the country is necessarily an anti-democratic step.
What about the president's words? What about the things he says about Putin and Xi that obviously demonstrate admiration?
I would say that, when I listen to what he says about both of them, what I hear is a little bit like Don Corleone talking about, it's sort of, you send flowers to the funeral, it's business, not personal. He does not believe in insulting these powerful leaders that he has to deal with. But, in his first term, and again, I don't want to get sort of pushed into the position of defending an administration that I didn't vote for, but if you look at his policies, the effect of his policies in the first term, they were pretty painful for Putin. What Putin, I think, liked about Obama policy included restricting fossil fuel production in the U.S. Trump helped to engineer a massive, crippling decrease. He was modernizing U.S. nuclear weapons and increasing defense spending, all of which are quite bad for Russia.
Just to follow up on this, if he is sending roses to Moscow, into Beijing, why is he insulting our allies? What's the strategy there?
Well,
I'll let Paul have that one.
Yeah. Thanks, Walter.
This is really an AEI kind of question.
Yeah.
That's in one.
This is the moment when I want to be like Boris Johnson and kind of shambolically, rearrange my hair. And anyway,
Go for it.
Here are some thoughts. One, the president has initially lacked what most U.S. leaders, all U.S. leaders, since World War II have had, which is actually a strategic humility. And I know you might think that's a funny thing for me to say, but hear me out. In the sense that it's important for de facto, the leader of the free world, to understand who our adversaries are, what they're up to, why, and what it means for us, short of, on one end of the spectrum, acquiescence to their goals, or on the other end, war. And I think for reasons which are complicated and have to do with history and psychology and so on, the president has not been steeped in that kind of thinking. And in some ways, his first term and the first year thus far have been the slow and painful process of that humbling taking part of its own accord because of the nature of who our adversaries are. And they have a say in things, and we're seeing this play out, as we've been talking about for most of the day, with respect to the Ukraine negotiations. Now, I feel comfortable, and I'm sure most of us here agree, it would be better to have come in with that set of assumptions and thoughts already worked out, but at least the reality is starting to sink in. Interestingly, in the first term, the deciding moment with respect to China was actually 2020, when two things happened. One was COVID, which in the president's mind hurt both his economy and his re-election chances, and the other was China's failure to live up to the deal, the trade deal. And I would have told you, well, both of those things were perfectly predictable from the start, but instead we have to watch it play out.
Can we talk about tariffs for just a moment?
About Paris.
Tariffs.
Oh, tariffs.
Sorry.
Paris is better, Walter.
I
love Paris. It's a
I
great.
think we can all agree on that one without problem. It's unclear at this point how this is all going to shake out. But one effect of this appears to be pushing many countries in the world towards China, who is supposedly our pacing rival. Xi has traveled through Asia, Europe, strategically, separate apart from the economic implications, strategically, were the tariffs a smart idea?
Well, I'm kind of a believer in free trade, basically. So I would say it's rarely tariffs. They're at best they're like chemotherapy that you only take if it, might poison the tumor before it poisons you. But I think that we should not. The fact that China is fundamentally a mercantilist economy actually makes this a very hard thing for Xi to do well, to say, I'm your friend, and oh, by the way, the products that the U.S. isn't taking are now going to flood your country and at a much lower price. My strategic plan is to destroy the German automotive industry, to basically take the luxury goods from Italy and France, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think on the question of who's a better economic partner, the United States has a lot less to fear from Chinese diplomacy than people think.
And yet we saw these numbers earlier today. I don't know if either of you saw the results of the Democracy Perception Index, which shows that China is held in higher regard than the U.S., and that Xi is held in higher regard than Trump in many parts of the world. What are the
It
implications?
intensifies my admiration for the political judgment of sub-Saharan Africans, I must say.
A very small spot on that map. But
It's not actually a very small
well,
spot.
it looked geographically in the map displayed here. It looked fairly small. Population-wise,
Mercator,
certainly
Mercator.
not. Oh, blame him.
But no, I think Trump is also, reasonably popular in India, although the last weekend may have challenged some of that.
Yeah.
Look, it's ultimately these things are not a popularity contest. They go up and down. I agree. Trump has been unnecessarily provocative. He has alienated a lot of people who would like to work with him and hopefully at some point will work with him. He makes diplomacy and in many ways policy more difficult, and the stock market has given its verdict on Trump's tariffs. So it is a mess. I'm not quite ready to say it is the ultimate disaster and, the horsemen of the apocalypse are riding down upon us.
Paul,
Yeah, Gene, on trade, we, America, have an issue, and Europe, have an issue, and the world has an issue, and that is mostly China. And we have been, Walter alluded to this, I think it was Prime Minister Rasmussen who said earlier today, we collectively can't be dependent on Russia for our energy and China to make our goods. So all of us, if we depend on our principal adversary to make our medicines, that should give us pause. And we saw some of that play out during COVID, but all of us need to do a better job of working together to address those issues. Now, having said that, this administration or any administration coming in could have said, we have a problem. We do, in fact, and I'm here to kind of say, I think this is the hard truth, we do, in fact, need to decouple important industries from China. And that is the way things are going and the way they should be going because of the nature of who they are and what they're up to and why. Okay, it's obviously better if we do that together. And so I regret that we, the United States, started a kind of everyone, everywhere, all at once trade war again. And this gets to my earlier theme. Churchill said America will always come to the right alternative after exhausting every possible alternative. I feel like the way we're actually headed in the various trade wars is, I think we will cut deals with as many of our closest allies and partners as we can, and then hopefully turn our attention to some of the structural issues with China.
What do you think is the guiding principle of Donald Trump's foreign policy? Is it America first, or is it Donald Trump's pocketbook first, or something else?
Donald Trump is really a difficult figure to analyze. Because on the one hand, he'll do things and say things that make you think the guy is just stupid. On the other hand, in the entire history of the human race, no single living person has occupied as large a share of the mind space of humanity as Donald Trump has managed to do. And with narrow majorities in both the House and the Senate, he has acquired more power than any American president since Franklin Roosevelt during World War II. It is extraordinary. What is behind that, I don't know. But it is, we should not underestimate Trump's capability. And even, for people like me who think in, ideas and try to make connected chains of logic, I'm like someone trying to understand soccer, football by, doing a mathematical analysis of a goal kick, right? Trump can't do any math, but he scores a lot more goals than I do. So I think it's difficult for a lot of us to understand how he works and come up with what he wants.
Is he scoring goals?
He has acquired more power than any figure in the U.S. in 70 years. He has, every world leader wakes up every morning wondering what Trump will do and what he needs to do.
What are those wins?
Apparently, I would say they are accomplishments.
Can I make a
Please do.
All right. I believe it was Prime Minister Johnson who said, sometimes what you see is what you get with him. And I think there's more to that than we might appreciate. And two things are underappreciated. One is, I keep hearing from European friends what we've heard some of today, which is Greenland and Canada and Panama are all connected. He wants to do a Super Monroe Doctrine and create or reestablish the strongest possible sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere, and then leave Europe and the Indo-Pacific to whoever can establish a sphere of influence there. I think actually that's jumping too far ahead. It might just be as simple as whether he's stirring up the pot or genuinely has concerns about Panama, et cetera. He makes these statements, but again, let's not be too careful to look ahead and say, well, he has this sphere of influence world. I think that might extend things too far.
We should also never forget, I think, that for Trump, he's producing the world's greatest reality television show.
Yeah. And he knows it.
And so in that sense, we can say that ratings are part of his goal, getting and capturing our attention and holding it, because that's his path to power, is that. And so many of his decisions are actually taken to create drama without necessarily being linked to a long-term political objective. But the political objective, the objective of having the freedom to choose his course of action with few restraints is enabled in his mind by being the greatest sort of stage manager in maybe the known history of our kind.
So, as mentioned, we have 3 3/4 years left. Of course, we don't know what wars will end, what wars will start, but can you do a little forecasting about what the world is going to look like by the end of Trump's second term?
We're in the middle of the greatest revolution in human affairs since the Industrial Revolution, and maybe greater. The information revolution is happening faster. It's happening on a wider geographic expanse than the Industrial Revolution, and it is likely going to change our societies more profoundly, even than the Industrial Revolution. I don't care who is president of the United States, leader of China, head of the European Commission. The world is going to be chaotic pretty much until we get through this, and maybe by then the next revolution is coming. And, you know, Donald Trump, I see as a manifestation of the chaos, not necessarily the prime mover of the chaos.
And I agree with all that. I also think again, reality will intrude, and so it already is, in the sense of, okay, if you're the president, right? If I cut a bad deal, Russia, Ukraine, and it falls apart, I don't want that politically on my watch. Leaving aside the moral and strategic imperatives, politically, I don't want that. And I think that's dawning on him and his administration. So the slightly optimistic take is we do what we need to do to put Ukraine in a strong position for a sustainable and just peace. We come to some kind of trade alignment internally among friends, and then start to address some of the structural issues that are changing. But in the meantime, and this is my overall message I hope everyone takes, because I think it's really important, from the US national interest perspective, we are here and we will be here. And we will be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And I worry somewhat at some of the conversation we heard earlier today about, well, maybe we should back off of, let's say, interoperability of military equipment with the US, because I have a sense, and probably many of you do too, knowing history, that 5 or 10 years from now at this conference, we'll be hoping and praying that your equipment and our equipment work together. So let's not, in the meantime, break off those ties that will be important 5 or 10 years from now.
Paul Leto and Walter Russell Mead, thank you both for your time and attention.